President Bola Tinubu yesterday yielded to the recommendations by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, and suspended the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management, Dr. Betta Edu, with immediate effect following alleged financial impropriety in her ministry. Edu's predecessor in office, Sadiya Umar Farouk, was yesterday also detained by EFCC over an alleged 37.1 billion naira fraud while she had held sway as minister. The presidency said Tinubu's directive was in line with his avowed commitment to uphold the highest standards of integrity, transparency, and accountability in the management of the Commonwealth of Nigerians. According to a statement by Tinubu's media advisor, Adri Ngelali, the president further directed the chairman of EFCC to conduct a thorough investigation into all financial transactions involving Edu's ministry, as well as agencies under it. Tinubu also tasked the investigating panel, headed by Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, to, among other functions, conduct a comprehensive diagnostic on the financial architecture and framework of the social investment programs. The president said this was to conclusively reform the relevant institutions and programs in a determined bid to eliminate all institutional frailties for the exclusive benefit of disadvantaged households and win back lost public confidence in the initiative. Also, the Minister of Interior, Olubomi Tunji Ojo, has denied personally benefiting through his company, New Planet Project Limited, from the sum of 438.1 million naira from the alleged fake 3 billion naira social register contract by the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, hitherto headed by Dr. Betta Edu. Even as more revelations emerged about who got what from the controversial contracts, the scandal showed no sign of abating. Instead, it spread like wildfire in Hamilton, with more people getting sucked in. Meanwhile, Imo State Governor Hope Uzodinma, the chairman of the APC Governors Forum, says the president's decision cannot be questioned and aligns with the law. After a meeting with President Tinubu at the presidential villa, Uzodinma highlighted the ongoing efforts to address national issues collaboratively.
Well, like you know, and which is very clear, whether Progressive Governors Forum or whether as a governor of Imo State, we have only one president whose wisdom we cannot question. And what is more, if there are allegations and Mr. President said, I want to look into it, I think it's consistent with the law and the oath of office is sworn to. So I don't think it's something that will begin to create a menu now for the media. So I think let's allow the sleeping dog to rest.
Also, President Bola Tinubu yesterday dismissed the chief executive officers of Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, Babatunde Rukera, and Director General, CEO, Bureau of Public Enterprises, Alexander Ayola Oko. In a statement, the dismissed chief executives were directed to hand over to the next most senior officer in their respective agencies, pending the appointment of new CEOs. The presidency said the action is in conformity with plans to restructure and reposition critical agencies of the federal government towards protecting the rights of Nigerian consumers and providing a strong basis for enhanced contributions to the nation's economy. It was a full day for the presidency for Nigeria yesterday, from the Betta Edu story with the governor of the Progressives Governors Forum meeting with the president, and now two, very prominent heads of agencies being given the sack letter.
So at first, about the head of agencies, I just think the president wanted to rejig things, and hence, him dismissing them, because apart from that, the likes of Babatunde Rukera have had a stellar record, as regards his service, and I must have to commend him for the job well done. He pretty much breathed life into anti-competition in Nigeria and became the anti-competition czar. And we cannot forget the big pronouncement recently, finding BAT guilty, as regards a couple of infractions that led to that fine of over $110 million and all of that. So he's had a checkered, past. And we can also forget numerous cases, like the case of Dr. Peju Ugomba, you know, that he stood solidly by and he fought to a certain position. So we cannot forget Rukera's work. And commendations to him as he takes time out. He'll definitely do other things in his life. But moving on now to the better case. I mean, kudos to President Tinubu on this for taking decisive action. You were sporting yesterday when you were saying, you know, that by this time, Better should have been suspended, you know, just also in fairness, just like the other lady was suspended. Ali Mashir was suspended. But for me, what I even thought that if there was even any modicum of sanctity, Better ought to have, you know, resigned over the weekend. It wasn't even supposed to get to the point of Monday where she was trying to seek an audience with President Tinubu and he rebuffed her. And good one there. I mean, she ought to have resigned. She's no spring chicken in the civil service. She was former commissioner, so she should know how procurement goes. So these are things that and she didn't deny it. So the allegations, the paper that came out, Better did not deny it. In fact, she justified it that she wanted to use that money, you know, for executing some projects there. That's why she sent it to a private account, which you'll be able to read from the law that it's a gross violation in the first place. So if there was any modicum of sanctity, it ought not even have gotten to the president now suspending that before you know that definitely you will be suspended one way or the other. There's no how. And I'm happy that Onward she has gone ahead to face the EFCC. And they should also carry out a forensic audit and a swipe through. Minister Wale Edu is going to lead the pack on that. He's going to look at all of these ministries with scrutiny, and we expect a logical conclusion. Concerning the humanitarian minister, I saw yesterday when he was coming to justify the argument. I don't think the interior minister, I don't think the argument is justified. At first, I praised him for the good work he's done as regards the passport and all of that he took us through, and we saw some of it. But there's no justification. You are a shareholder in the company. Yeah, you resigned as a director in 2019. You were able to state that, but you are still a shareholder in the company. So at the end of the year, when they share profits in that company, that proceed of 420-something million, whatever issue for the country, is going to be part of your profit and loss account. And it comes to you. In other parts of the world, if you're a shareholder like that, you probably put it in a trust. That's what you do. Did he put it in a trust that we didn't know about? But he's still bearing him as a shareholder in the company. So we would like to get more clarity as regards that. And why is it that the contagion effect is so much that this minister, his company has any dealing, was given that contract? I would like to even see the tender for that contract in the first place. What is the due process that was followed? And at some point, Madam Obi Ezekwesili was leading due process in President Olusegun Obasanjo's cabinet. What due process was followed? I mean, obviously, the trails were there. Mr. Tunji Ojo had a thing to do with this company, and this company became a government contractor all of a sudden. And he was saying, no, if I give somebody a job in my interior ministry, that's the breach. No. As long as any job is coming out of that President Tinubu's cabinet, and you're a minister and it's coming to your company, it is a breach. Because I saw a lot of this argument. I would like to have him on this show. Let us debate those things. Let's for rounded conversations this morning. You are still a shareholder of the company. Secondly, you are saying it's not a breach because the company dealt with the humanitarian ministry. If you gave them job in interior, hell no. As long as you serve in that cabinet and it's remotely close to you, it becomes a breach. Look at Trump being eviscerated in America because Trump's organization got monies close to $6 or $7 million from various foreign companies as president. And he was still running those businesses. So that's the breach. So we would like to have him here to talk more about this matter. And other people too that have been named in this contagious effect. We would like to ask, what was the accountability of even the job done? Who even audited the job done in the first place? And that's why I said yesterday, I said something very profound, that this administration reek of the excreta of corruption. I deliberately use that word. Because this administration that is saying Buhari's government, they didn't leave anything there. Hitherto there was corruption and all of that. So how about you? And this is just one fell swoop. 2 people in the humanitarian ministry. And that's why I keep calling. Yes, I know you were saying federal government can still run interventionist schemes without, humanitarian ministry. In fact, the best run interventionist scheme are run in consonance with international aid agencies. Those are the best run interventionist scheme in this country. A great example, you didn't need the humanitarian ministry to be able to run, things like access to education that is done by all these foreign bodies, even vaccination and things like that. There was a rural body in the Ministry of Health that ran that. But when you look at it closely, the best of this scheme that are run with these international best practices, global acceptable standards, are run in partnership with international bodies. So what the government should do, rather than this frivolous money that we know they are sharing around now, is there are many things that all these international bodies need counterpart funding on the government for. Take, for instance, there's something UNICEF have been talking for a while. Nutrition for malnourished children between the ages of 0 to 5. The government and the states needs to put a lot of counterpart funding. How can you give them nutritional tablets for them to be able to take? So let those things be accordance with the goal of, social development or, sustainable development goals. And that's the way you can run it effectively, so that you have an accountability partner. And it's obvious. You see, when we're talking then, when the World Bank was saying, no, the register is verified and all of that, it's obvious that we knew that they might be local shenanigans. Only to think that most of these monies are even borrowed in the first place. Were we not taking money for conditional cash transfers of that? And please, for the conditional transfers of cash, we need a comprehensive independent audit on how the monies were disbursed. And also, let's review any interventionist scheme run before now. Even the government contract of clearing glass, the COVID-19 job, how were these things run effectively? That's how to run a government. It's not rocket science. Let's get to work.
Investigations, and more investigations. Let me start with the last story as well, Rufai, with regards to the two gentlemen who were who were relieved of their jobs, one with the FCCPC and the other with the BPE, Mr. Babatunde Rikura and Mr. Alex Oko, respectively. In addition to the things you mentioned, and I think it's important that when public officials or people who serve the country have done so really well, they ought to be celebrated, because we don't just point our fingers on bad eggs. It's important to also celebrate and acknowledge those who've done really well. I'll talk about Mr. Irukera, because he changed the face of the FCCPC in terms of being accessible and consistently giving updates. He was accessible even on his social media platforms. You would see that he would try to respond whenever you reported a consumer infraction or the rights of a consumer wasn't well protected. I wouldn't forget what happened during the COVID-19 lockdown, when some supermarkets hiked the price of face masks and hand sanitizers, and the FCCPC clamped down on some of these operators and supermarkets to ensure that they were not ripping off Nigerians. These were some of his key achievements, or key things that we would most remember him for. And then he was very gracious in accepting the decision by the presidency. On his X account, he had talked about the fact that Nigerians deserve better, and that he was happy and proud to have left behind a strong institution. And I love the fact that he didn't sound bitter. He sounded like his time had come to an end, and he was proud of the work they had done whilst he was FCCPC boss. A lot to learn from that, especially in the climate that we're in. And so I wish he and Mr. Alex Oko all the best on their next endeavors. I hope that Nigerians will retain great brains like themselves, and so even if they're not in these positions, that they can go on further to do other things in other agencies or departments. Now, over to the big case of the moment. It's been trending since yesterday, and for a good reason, because these are issues that must be discussed in Nigeria. And that's the matter of the alleged financial misappropriation or diversion of funds by the suspended Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, Dr. Betta Edu. Now, there have been, while some of I mentioned earlier that Governor of Imo State and also the chairman of the Progressive Governors Forum, Chief Hope Uzodinma, had said that the president was right, supported the president, saying that this was a confirmation of zero tolerance to corruption in this administration. Others, like Senator Ali Ndume and other civil rights organizations like Huriwa, Serap, have come out to commend the effort or the move of the president to suspend the minister pending whilst investigation is ongoing. However, we did also see some posters in support of Dr. Betta Edu, and some people saying or crying that it's a witch hunt. Oh, it's because she wanted to expose some people. That's why they're trying to tie her down. And this narrative must stop in Nigeria if we're going to build a better nation. I'm saying this because yesterday, I emphasized the fact that the investigations are still ongoing, and until the conclusion of the investigation, she's innocent until proven guilty. However, it was still highlighted as long as the memo was original, then there was an infraction there already. So in that instance, not very innocent. But in terms of what the motive was, whether indeed it was done out of ignorance, that will then come out during the investigation. Now, another reason why the investigation is important is because beyond Dr. Betta Edu herself, we must also find out the people who collected the money. Where did this money go to? Who were the beneficiaries? One of such that's come out, of course, is the new Planet Project Limited, which has Mr. Olubumi Tunji Ojo as shareholder, and also Abimbola Tunji Ojo, which I believe is his relative, as shareholders, and a number of people, even though they desisted from being shareholders from 2019. However, like you mentioned, Rufai,
they desisted from being directors.
Right, not shareholders, directors in 2019. Now, as you've mentioned, they still remain shareholders. The reason why this has come up and is quite important for us to dissect is because a number of people know how this works. And I'm not saying that this is what happened in this instance, but it's happened in other places where government officials set up special organizations or SPVs or just organizations that they are backing and award frivolous contracts to them or give them preferential treatment without due process being followed. This is a practice that has happened again and again under different administrations. And so we know how government officials wouldn't put their names right there, but they'll back certain companies or have private arrangements with certain companies and give them undue advantage in accessing certain funds or getting certain contracts. If we're going to fight corruption in this country, we must also fight such underhanded practice, especially by government officials. Again, I'm not saying Mr. Tunji Ojo has done this in this case until the investigation reveals what truly occurred. However, it is suspicious because why is this coming? What is the remit of the organization, and what kind of service did they render to the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation? What was it that they were supposed to do? Are they a money distribution organization to help to distribute the amount of money to the most vulnerable of people? Now, going back to what I said about witch hunt, and I saw one poster, if it's real, about from South, some groups from South, and saying she's our daughter, we're proud of her. I think that is very interesting, because when you look at the matter on ground, the 4 states that were meant to be beneficiaries of the grants for vulnerable groups are Akwa Ibom, Cross River, where she comes from, Lagos and Ogun State. This money was meant to go to support vulnerable groups in these 4 states, and this money was diverted. Rather than coming up with ridiculous statements about how you're proud of her, it's a witch hunt, you should be incensed that the money that was meant for the most vulnerable people in your state was diverted. It should be a cause of concern that people who are suffering, some people who have gone to bed hungry, the most vulnerable in society, were deprived of government funding because someone chose to divert that money by giving contracts that do not make sense. That's what you should be fighting for. One human being is not better than another person because of the position they hold. So if you're saying you're in support of what the minister allegedly did, then you are saying that to the hundreds of beneficiaries or thousands in your state, they don't matter. That they are less, and it doesn't really matter if they were cheated of what belongs to them because you are proud of your daughter. We should end this narrative in this new administration, because we keep focusing on the government when it comes to anti-corruption. But it starts with every Nigerian, every individual. If you're supporting acts of corruption under the guise of she's our own, she's our daughter, then we'll never move forward. If you are clouded by the fact that this person is our own, so don't talk to her, then you should be really ashamed. When a child steals, the mother a good parent will reprimand and ensure that they are more interested in the well-being of the child rather than trying to protect and bring in more disrepute to the family. And this is what I'm calling for. What we should be hearing from this state is that she should cooperate with the officials, with EFCC, with the presidency, and undergo thorough investigation so that it acts as a deterrent to other children from that state to behave well when they get on the national stage to given a position. Beyond the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Alleviation, this is another call to the presidency. I don't believe that this is the only ministry where this is happening, or the minister is the only one who is perhaps, if found guilty, culpable. I believe this is an opportunity, having found out that these things happen, which I'm sure is not a surprise to many people, to then demonstrate further, as Governor Hope Uzodinma has said, that this is a demonstration, and Ajuri Ngelale, that this is a demonstration that the president is committed to anti-corruption. Audit other departments and agencies, especially those that cater to or give grants to people. The Ministry of Women Affairs, the Department of SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, the Ministry of Works. These departments that hitherto are called juicy, in quote, I put that in inverted commas, because there's a lot of largesse and there are many projects awarded, projects that don't have head or tail, or where you cannot trace or find out what the audit process or procurement process was. Ministries like that should come under scrutiny. Let's put some fire, let me put it that way, under these ministries so that they perform and they act. The reason why there must be consequences to action if we're going to build a better nation is that there must be seen to have infractions like this must be seen to have punitive measures. Let's investigate this department. Let's understand what's really going on. Let's have it more transparent. And again, I bring this forward. Whenever there's a project that addresses the needs of people in Nigeria, that's very obvious. Like what happened with the presidency giving allocations of bags of rice to senators and House of Representative members, and now we have issues around that. Let there be a portal where Nigerians can directly report any infraction. Did you get it or did you not get it? Very simple. Show working. Very easy. Let's have a portal where the people, the citizens, can actively hold their public officers to account. If not, we'll continue to have infractions like this. And then I'm hoping that following the investigations, the Ministry of Finance will tighten the process of contracts being awarded or monies being disbursed by said ministries or all ministries. Very critical. The reason we must continue to talk about this is because we are hoping that we will build stronger institutions where corruption is difficult to do or to propagate in any ministry, department, or agency. Move on to our next story. 100 million naira has been awarded against the federal government in favor of the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Godwin Emefiele. The High Court of the FCT ruled that his continued detention is a violation of his fundamental rights. Arise correspondent Godfrey Eshemoge has more.
The former CBN governor, who was suspended on June 9, was officially taken into custody by the DSS for a period spanning June 13 to October 26, before he was moved to the EFCC until the 8th of November, when he was granted bail by the FCT High Court. In its judgment, the court restrained the federal government and its agents from rearresting or detaining Emefiele without an order of a court with competent jurisdiction. A fundamental rights suit was filed by the former CBN governor following his prolonged detention in the custody of the Department of State Services, DSS, an anti-graft agency, the EFCC. The court said the remand warrant obtained from the Chief Magistrate Court in Wuse Zone 2, on which the government used to justify Emefiele's continued detention, was questionable, as it had 2 dates of issuance. The judge said the warrant, therefore, failed the credibility test. The trial judge said it's unlawful for security agencies to carry out arrests without sufficient grounds to do so. Emefiele had asked the court to order the respondents to pay the sum of 1 billion naira as compensation for his unlawful arrests and detention by the agents of government.
When it comes to release, especially damages, is within the discretion of the courts, and that is what the court thought the applicant is entitled to, and that's what the court granted. The applicant should be okay. The applicant should be okay. It's a well-thought ruling, and the judge did a very, very good job. The court has been so emphatic on the points that he can no longer be rearrested unless there is an order of court. And we are very okay with that. If they feel that there's a need for them to arrest him, they should come before the court, obtain the order and get him arrested. I believe he's going nowhere.
The court, however, ruled that Emefiele couldn't sufficiently prove his case of threat to his life. The former CBN chief was arrested on June 10, 2023, shortly after his suspension by President Bola Tinubu. Godfrey Eshemoge, Arise News.
All right, Rufai, your take on the story?
The Emefiele debacle continues, but this victory in court, the court already 100 million against the EFCC and other security body, I think it's a reminder that in as much as we want the EFCC and other security bodies to do their job, but they must also respect court processes. But to a large extent, they do not respect court processes. We remember the debacle in Lagos here, when the court had granted Emefiele bail and said, go perfect, and should be submitted to the prison services. But guess what happened? The DSS fought the prison services. I've never seen something like that. That was the first time two government agencies were fighting each other in a scruff. If our producer can put that picture again, we have to see the fighting match that they tore the uniform of the prison service official. And this was when the court had said, go and perfect it. And the DSS took him. They put him in incarceration and all of that. As that persisted, the next phase was when the EFCC picked him up. The court, again, said there was a subsisting court order about letting him go. But the EFCC still held on to him. Even when he was granted bail in Kuje prison, there were copious videos and pictures that showed that EFCC officials were still mounted in front of Kuje prison with the hope of rearresting him. And it's based on that he went there for his rights, and the court granted him. So I think the EFCC should also learn. And as they are going to prosecute Betta's case and other people's case, we should also understand that these people have a right to fair hearing, and the court process must be followed. Because in all of these cases, definitely we are going to see an extended court process. By extension, we hear that the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs was interrogated by the EFCC yesterday, and probably those interrogations might continue. We also accord them their rights, because you cannot say you are upholding the rule of law and also breaching the law and disrupting, the court order and the court process as regards the rights of these individuals. And that's one thing the EFCC needs to understand. And also, I would like to call on the EFCC and other security body. I think this attempt of media trial should be stopped. Because we know the connivance, we know what goes on. We know how officials are giving scoops. And in the end, when all these scoops are given, the cases cannot be substantiated in court. I think the EFCC should rather spend more effort at ensuring that they get watertight evidence so we can have more conviction numbers. Till today, the EFCC feigns ignorance at the fact that somebody that was put in their custody, a former governor that was put in their custody, that was stripped up to his boxers, his picture sufficed online. How did the picture come out? It must have been somebody from the inside. Let us do the work. Let us get the conviction, not the sensation.
All right, so Justice Olukayode Adeniyi of the Federal High Court in FCT, of the High Court of the Federal Capital Territory, had gave this ruling, 100 million naira awarded in favor of the former governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, against the EFCC. Now, the EFCC have said that they are going to appeal this ruling, saying that the courts didn't take into cognizance the fact that they had a valid court order to detain the former CBN governor. However, a few points, and I think it's very important, made by Justice Olukayode Adeniyi in his judgment. Number one was that he said that despite the EFCC saying they had valid court order, court document to support or to validate their detention of Emefiele, they queried the validity of those of the court orders as it carried two different dates. So so how legitimate those orders were or how effectual they are was queried by the courts. They described the detention of 5 months of former Governor Godwin Emefiele as unconstitutional as illegal and as unlawful. And I think it's important, a statement made by the judge, where he mentioned that it is that EFCC must move away from detaining suspects before a conviction is had for long periods of times. It is against the law. That is what the court ruled yesterday, and it is important because, like you said, Rufai, we've seen this a number of times. The FCC has been criticized for this. I know the worst part of it is that after all the show and fights, as we saw on the conviction, nothing, because of the insufficient evidence. And so they haven't done their homework, yet they are keeping a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in detention or holding him without any tangible evidence of wrongdoing to necessitate such a detention. I think it's really important because whilst they say they had a valid court order, there were also court orders for asking or directing the release of Mr. Godwin Emefiele. We're not saying that people or public officials shouldn't be investigated. Absolutely. We talked about that extensively even with the last story. However, in so doing, it must be done according to the law, and it must be done with the dignity of every individual, and of course, in adherence to the law that he must be treated as innocent until proven guilty. I think these are critical issues too, except of course in extenuating circumstances which the law provides for. It is important to mention that, again, an end to media trials. I'm sure Dangote Group might also be taking them to court at this rate because they've had to come out with statements upon statements to give their own side of the story with what occurred when they bombarded their offices. These are issues that we must talk about so that we must, because we want the EFCC to succeed. We want them to fight corruption. We want them to investigate issues around, around corrupt activities. But it also has to be done properly so that we're not in a state of anarchy. Very important. And as I mentioned this, I also want to say the same for the ongoing investigation. With regards to the former Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and the current Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, that whilst that is going on, it is important to also remember that they ought to be treated respectfully and with dignity. People might not like, the allegations against them, but until it's proven in a competent court of law and there's a judgment against them, I think it's important for the EFCC to act accordingly. There must be rules of engagement. They must have their own personal rules, and this must be adhered to. We are not a lawless society. We are a society governed by relevant laws, and this must be obeyed. We'll wait to see what happens, as they've mentioned, that they will take it further to an appeal court. Let's see what happens with that. But in the meantime, the judgment says 100 million naira awarded to former governor of the CBN, Godwin Emefiele, for the conduct of the EFCC against him whilst he was in detention for about 5 months without any concrete evidence against him to that effect.